The World Food Programme says no food has entered northern Gaza since the start of the month, October 1st. And it says that in the past 2 months, just over 1,000 aid trucks have entered the area. Georgios Petropoulos is head of the sub-office in Gaza for the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. He was recently in northern Gaza and talked about what he saw there.
Counting more than a year of this war, and since October 1st, with the Iranian missile attacks, things have clamped down very much here. In Gaza, there's been very little movement in and out of humanitarian supplies. There's been very little movement of humanitarians able to reach the people in need. Now, as you know, in southern Gaza, where most of the population is and has displaced to from the north, the situation is very dire. What little humanitarian aid supplies we have left are going straight to the people that need it. And what little supplies are able to come in through the one crossing that is left to us from the Israeli authorities is almost in its entirety looted or diverted from criminals when it comes in. In the new operation that the Israeli army has launched in North Gaza Governorate in the north, we have more than 150,000 people that are affected, especially in the Jabalia camp. This camp has been fully encircled by the Israeli military and is under very heavy bombardment and very heavy fighting from the Israelis. So far, people are displacing in North Gaza to other parts of North Gaza, but very few choose to come to the south, where they know that conditions are in an absurd turn of events, even worse than they are in the north. We've been it's been very challenging for us to get there. Since the 1st of October, only three missions of the United Nations have been able to go up. And those were extremely urgent missions, either for fuel and medical supplies to the very few hospitals that are left in North Gaza. There's 3 that are still operational. And one was a medical evacuation last night to move 19 critically injured patients from North Gaza to Gaza City, which is still in the north, but outside of the heavy fighting.
What would you say is the greatest concern right there now? Is it the food? Is it the water? Is it the medical concerns, safety? What's your biggest concern right now?
That's the usual trinity that we have on our minds. It's the food and the water and the medical supplies. You have to understand that the lack of medical supplies is actually even the inability to put dialysis patients on a machine because of the fuel that will run out. So on October 10th, the World Food Programme managed to get fuel to the 5 remaining bakeries in the north that are still putting out bread for the people to eat. There's not much else to eat because both of the crossings are closed, like I said, and the private sector and humanitarian supplies are unable to reach the north. So the food will run out in a few days without actual flour and fuel. The medical supplies have trickled in, but the number of ill and injured continues to rise, and primary health care has ground to a complete stop in the North Gaza Governorate. There are also a rising number of heavily injured people, and they need to be seen to by advanced care. You'll remember that in the last year, even in Gaza City, the hospitals there have all undergone incursions themselves. They are not in a state to respond. Yesterday, being part of the medical evacuation, I found myself at Shifa Hospital, where we took the patients. Shifa Hospital used to be one of the largest medical facilities in the Gaza Strip. It's now essentially 2 hallways with a few rooms working out of the old outpatient center with only 2 operating rooms. So the capacity for medical response is almost zero. For water, I think it's very simple. We've said it before. There is no water in Gaza unless there is fuel for the desalination plants. Failing that, people will be forced to drink salt water.
I want to talk about safety a little bit, because we have been reporting in the news over the last few days that a number of UN peacekeepers in Lebanon had been injured. Israel's prime minister has been urging them to move out of southern Lebanon, out of areas of fighting. How concerned are you for your teams and their protection under the UN banner when peacekeepers are not necessarily being afforded that protection at the moment?
We are concerned, we've been concerned, and it's a daily occurrence. It's a deplorable state of humanitarian law here in Gaza. It has been. Yesterday during the evacuation, An ambulance driver from the Palestinian Red Crescent was forced to strip, was handcuffed and blindfolded for almost an hour before we could negotiate his release back into the convoy and continue south. This was by Israeli forces. So any move that we do to the north is moving into a contested area, a very, very acute battle. And any convoy, any field mission, any attempt to bring aid, to assess the needs of the people, or to move people that need it from one part of Gaza to the other, requires us to be extremely careful and requires the United Nations through offices like OCHA, like my office, to be in constant communication and coordination with the Israeli military.
And we also know that we're sort of teetering on the brink of a much more significant conflict. We know Israel has been mulling its plans to retaliate for attacks by Iran. What kind of preparations are you making for any increase that we might see in hostilities?
Despite our best efforts to explain this to our partners, I think the Israeli government, to our donors, when you are inside Gaza, it is very difficult to plan for anything. We are inside a closed ecosystem, a fishbowl, if you will. So anything that comes in, there has to be a decision for it to come in. Plans are very cheap and very frequently made here. Very few of them actually come to fruition in the way that we'd like to see. The North Gaza operation has significantly affected the planning for the second round of polio, especially in the north. And we are now told by Israeli authorities that our joint planning for winterization, which is essentially bringing tents and plastic sheeting and making sure that flood-prone areas are rendered safe, will not go as planned, especially in terms of supplies. They simply will not be able to come into Gaza through the limited crossings or one crossing that is left to us in the south of the Strip. So the planning can take place. It's maybe one of the few things we can do, but the response to the real human suffering of millions of people and the alleviation of the lack of dignity, that's not getting better, and it's getting worse day by day. So we're left simply in a state of catastrophe, which is a state that we've been very clear we would be in if things took the course that they did over the last year. You'll remember that the Rafah operation, which closed the Rafah crossing, was supposed to be a limited operation of a few weeks, but it began in May.
You paint a very dire picture. I just have a few seconds left, really, but I want to ask, if you can summarize what you need now with everything that you're dealing with that you've just described.
If we are to avert a real human catastrophe, real conditions of famine in the next 2 months, we're going to need laser sharp focus from the Israeli government on the volume of crossings that need to open. We're going to put it very simply, we're going to need to have a shift change in how we discuss the needs of the people here as they relate to the humanitarian response. The humanitarian supplies and aid workers that are made available for the people of Gaza have to be based on the needs of the people of Gaza and not on political considerations or how a war or a future war is going in the Middle East region. That is the humanitarian imperative, and that is what we're here to continue every day to remind everyone from different member states, regional powers, the government of Israel, and I should say actually both sides to this conflict.
Georgios Petropoulos, you certainly have your work cut out for you, and tough work at that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.